Hi, big hello from Portland, Oregon. Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing and More. In this specific show, I talk about everything B2B related. And today I have a special guest, Steve Kearns from LinkedIn. And we will be talking about content marketing and blog and social media. I had such a great conversation with him. We actually broke this down into part one and part two. And I hope that you can listen and learn from him. A lot of good nuggets in terms of you want to scale your content across regions. So let's get started, okay? Talk to us in terms of the blog, the centerpiece.
Yes.
And how do you manage your writing staff? Are they in-house or outsourced? And do you have any suggestions to the listeners in terms of how to manage the writing staff, for enterprises and also for small businesses?
So I'm focused on leading the strategy kind of cross-functional relationships, dot connecting across, the blog function, social media marketing function, and the web content marketing function. And then within my team, we have dedicated subject matter experts for each of those channels, so to speak. I have a blog editor-in-chief whose sole job is to focus on running the day-to-day and, really setting the vision for the topics we're going to talk about, the content strategy on the blog specifically. Her name's Takia Burt. She's been working in the B2B marketing space. She was connected to me through another colleague, Sean Callahan.
Sean is fantastic too. I happen to know both of them. I love them.
They're really wonderful people. We're so lucky to have so many great content marketers here at LinkedIn. Takia is now focused full-time on delivering sort of that day-to-day operations, but also content strategy and vision for the blog. And, there's no better person who knows the B2B marketing space and, can really set that vision than Takia. And she works with a number of different partners across our business, both internally to source internal submissions. So where you'll have different stakeholders across the business submitting content to her saying, hey, I want to write about X, Y, and Z. Is this a fit for the blog? And we've actually preempted those submissions with what we're calling a style guide. So we send around to our partners, because otherwise you get into a situation where the tail is wagging the dog with stakeholder submissions. We say, hey, here are the 6 things that 6 is an arbitrary number, but here are the 6 things that we talk about. And here are the 6 things that our audience wants to hear about. Here's a breakdown of what our audience demographics look like. Here's who visits the blog. Here's the traffic data. Here is the volume of subscribers we have access to, just so we give our partners a full picture of what it is they're writing for, who it is they're speaking to, et cetera, to make sure that we're actually getting productive submissions. So that's one lens.
Is that external submission or a combination of internal and external submission?
A little bit of both. I would say more toward internal, but that can also account for external as well. So really anything that's coming through other marketers in our organization or folks externally, that's going to go through that like style guide or submission-esque process where we inform folks who are writing for the blog, hey, this is what we're looking for. This is what good looks like. Provide them examples, give them like image guidelines, just like make it a really easy experience for them to be able to submit something that's optimized for the blog. I would say the other lens that we look at is Takia works specifically with an agency to produce all of our SEO-driven content. Again, are working with experts in the B2B marketing field to look at what are the keywords that our business wants to go after, and then also what topics among our target audience have the highest search volume. It's kind of triangulating between those 2 topics to figure out, well, the other 50% of our blog content is going to be focused specifically on making sure we're ranking in Google effectively. One of the things when I first took over the blog that I was shocked by was that we weren't actually ranking for some things that we really should be ranking for, like on page 1. Things like how to market on LinkedIn. Something as simple as that.
You should own that.
Exactly. So that was one of the mandates as we went into the migration. We said, well, part of the problem is that we've created 10 different content pieces about how to market on LinkedIn that are all diluting the search volume and the search traffic. So what we need to actually start doing, and this is something that I say over and over and over again to our cross-functional stakeholders, is you need to take one blog post that you turn into like a power page and you update that periodically so you continue to remind Google that that is the page that deserves the authority. And that becomes your primary page for which you funnel the majority of your traffic. You can always link them off to subpages, to microsites, to webinars, to advertising platform directly. But it's, again, consolidating that information, updating that information regularly, making sure that we're giving the search engine the roadmap to prioritize our content effectively. So that is the other 50% of the content is focused on search engine optimization focused
Got it.
content.
So let me summarize very quickly. Sounds like your whole editorial in terms of managing your content, there are two buckets, if you will. One is based on internal, external submission. Obviously, that needs to align with the 4 pillars and 21 topics.
Yep.
And then the other one is you really, really hone in on some of the things that say LinkedIn marketing solution needs to be, need to own.
Yep.
Or some of the content that from your perspective that really needs to rank on the
Yep.
first page
Absolutely.
of Google. And with that, you will be very, very specific and you customize the content. Granted, it's still very much relevant to users' needs, but you will write it specifically for SEO. But the writing for that kind of post is you have to hone in terms of SEO optimized type of content.
Yes,
I like
absolutely.
that. That's actually very good. Steve, you actually have a very, very good approach on
Thank
everything that
you.
you do for content marketing. Oh my God.
Thank you. It's been a labor of love, and hats off to folks like Takia and Sean, our agency partners, who, genuinely have taught me everything I know. And
Yeah.
we're so lucky to have the folks in the room that we do, and also I think leadership that's supportive of these like big sweeping changes that we want to make to say, hey, we're actually going to get rid of 60% of the content we've paid to create already because it's not doing anything for us. It doesn't have the page views we wanted to have. Nobody cares about it. So they've been really helpful in supporting us.
You literally have to kill your own children in a way. Your baby too, actually.
Yeah.
It's a rebirth. Another thing I would like to ask specifically is in terms of the updating and refreshing the blog post, how often do you kind of evaluate, given that you have so many blog posts, right, over thousands of them, how do you manage that? How do you determine which one to refresh and update? And do you look, what kind of data do you look?
We've actually just started our refresh and SEO optimization workflow because we wanted to do the migration first. And then once we had the infrastructure in place, we said, okay, let's turn our attention to SEO. So the direction that I gave my team was, and this is a lot of guidance that came from our agency partners as well, is like, well, let's focus on the stuff that's on fire right now. So what is on fire? Posts from 2016 or 2017 that talk about how to advertise on LinkedIn, that is where the majority of our search traffic is going to. And they show outdated screenshots. They talk about products that don't exist anymore, a complete mess. We wanted to make sure that we dealt with those posts first. So in this first wave of optimizations, which you'll actually see republishing across our blog in the next couple of months, you're going to be seeing a lot of posts that focus on how to advertise on LinkedIn. Posts that are focused on key search terms like demand generation, lead generation, content marketing, social media marketing, etc. Those are going to be us taking our highest traffic posts and bringing them into the modern age, into what marketing looks like in 2021, what marketing on LinkedIn looks like in 2021. That is top priority because you have to look at what is the most critical thing to prioritize. Then once we get past that wave of posts, and there's probably, I would say top priority, about 100 posts, secondary priority, maybe 250 out of all of them.
That makes a lot of sense to me too. It's, in general, you really follow that 90-10 rule or 20-80 rule, 3,000, 10% of them.
And then you can get to a point where right now we're being reactive, but then we're going to move into a phase where we become proactive. So once we get to a place where our highest performing content, over X number of page views is all recent, i.e. has been updated in 2021 or 2022, then we can move to, okay, it's like similar to what we talked about of our, topic tagging structure on the blog, where you have looking at specific pain points and then looking at specific advertising products and creating a power page for each of those needs.
When you say power page, can you be a little bit specific? Does that mean that it actually had the landing page of its own? Or it's still a blog page, but it's a long form? How do you define that?
Yeah, so the latter definitely is, you hit the nail on the head, Pam. Looking at really just, it's a longer blog post that's going to be updated periodically. So that's like a phrase we use at LinkedIn, but I'm glad you asked me to define it because that could totally be confusing for someone who doesn't work in the context of the LinkedIn corporation. We really look at these long form blog posts that we're going to be updating periodically, time over time. Usually it's going to be on a quarterly or a biannual basis. What we want to do there is we want to make sure that every single time someone is searching for a B2B marketing keyword or a B2B marketing pain point or objective, or if they're searching for one of our products specifically, if they don't necessarily know what their objective is, but they know they want to use LinkedIn sponsored content, in either of those unique instances, they're going to have one microsite page they land on and one blog post they land on. So that you,
Okay.
again, are like coalescing that organic search traffic around one page on the microsite, one page on the blog. And what that allows us to also do is say, okay, maybe that's only 100 pages. And we have to make sure that those 100 pages are near perfect.
They are solid.
Mm-hmm. And we have to make sure the reporting and tracking is right on those pages. We have to make sure that they're updated consistently. And that's a much easier charter for my team and for cross-functional teams than, okay, you have 6,000 blog posts. You have to make sure they're all sort of updated.
I'm just going to take a little break here in terms of if you like the content. Steve has shared so much useful content. If you really like it, comment and like below. And if you have any specific questions, ask. And I will actually make sure that even I can address that question. If I can't, I will have Steve address that question. Okay? So comment and like below. It will be greatly appreciated. Let's switch gear a little bit. And I know that your title is the head of blog and social media marketing. So what social media channels are you using in addition to LinkedIn, of course? What other channel do you use? Do you do pay as well?
We do paid media. So we do paid media across really all platforms. And that is handled on, my team focuses primarily on organic social media. We have other teams that handle our paid social media.
Twitter, Facebook, and of course your LinkedIn, your native platform. What about TikTok?
TikTok, so we use that at the corporate level. We do not use that at the marketing solutions level just yet. This is an interesting call out because we're an advertising business.
Yeah.
Is that we've had I would say a bit of like a story journey in terms of figuring out what social media platforms we should leverage, especially organically. So because my team handles organic social media, we're currently across LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
Is Facebook is not one of your options, huh? Can you tell us why?
Yeah. So, and this is a conversation that we've gone back and forth on internally quite a bit. There's two things here. The first is looking at the context of different platforms and what those platforms are going to do for us. Twitter, right now, our channel mix, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, are all vastly different content platforms.
They are completely. I'm actually on all platforms. Many people would tell me, Pam, you should focus on one. But the thing is, I'm a consultant.
Right.
And a B2B marketing consultant, I need to know all platforms. So I test the waters all the time. I also know that doing the video platform is very different than, say, writing blog.
One of the things that we've tried to really focus in on is making sure that we can communicate in very different contexts on each of those platforms. So video on YouTube, obviously. We do a lot of graphic content on Instagram that's really top of funnel. On Twitter, we have an opportunity to have a little more of a conversation with our audiences and have that news style programming. Yeah. And then on LinkedIn, that's really our bread and butter channel when it comes to showing that we can be a best in class use case for marketing on the platform. In terms of your question, Pam, around why not Facebook, I think there's so much overlap on Facebook between the use cases on Twitter, the use cases on LinkedIn, YouTube, et cetera, that we didn't feel that we needed to add another platform to the mix. Yeah. There was also a kind of a conscious decision around, we want to make sure we're investing primarily in LinkedIn. Facebook, Google, Twitter, they're all key advertising competitors of ours. And we want to make sure that we are not so much that we don't see the value in marketing on Facebook. We absolutely do. It's more of, okay, my team has 40 hours a week to spend.
Yeah, you want to prioritize.
Mm-hmm. I want them to be spending 30 of those hours thinking about how we market on LinkedIn.
On these 4 channels, yeah.
So, I would say one of the interesting things about my journey at LinkedIn is looking at how much more robust LinkedIn and our LinkedIn Pages experience has become over the last 5 years. So when I first joined the social marketing team 5 years ago, we were primarily using Twitter because our platform didn't have the capabilities it now has to be as dynamic in terms of capability to have events, streaming capabilities, just the page manager experience to be able to have those two-way conversations as a brand. Now you can do all of that on LinkedIn. So it gives us a really clear mandate to say, we now have all of the tools we need to build a brand on LinkedIn first. Now my team is taking advantage of that, which is a really, I would say, positive, exciting transition that we've made away from doing marketing first on another platform. So now we're doing marketing first on our own platform. And that, for obvious reasons, makes a ton of sense.
That strategically, that makes a lot of sense to me, given I'm in the corporate world for a long time.
Yeah.
Now, another question I would like to ask you, given that the four channels that you mentioned, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube,
Hmm.
do you have a set of frequency in terms of publishing for each channel? Or
Yes.
it's the same? Like, blog you mentioned is 5 days a week.
Hmm.
Okay, great. But do you do that for every single channel, or have a different sets of frequency?
Yes. So for each channel, each has its own set of frequencies. So I would say on Instagram, it's about 3 times a week. Twitter is, I believe, about once a day. And then LinkedIn is going to be 2 to 3 times a day.
Got
YouTube
it.
is more as needed as we have new video series that come out.
Yeah.
In a future state, we would get much more advanced with YouTube where there's actually a ton of SEO.
Yeah, definitely. There's just another monster that you have to master.
Exactly. Like there could be a whole full-time job dedicated to the sort of
Yes.
suggested, like the linking and backlinking you can do in YouTube videos, like next your content suggestions, etc. We don't have the bandwidth to do that currently, so we're more uploading and kind of saying, here you go. But I think that's definitely a future goal of mine if the team continues to grow.
You touched this a little bit, and I have to come to that realization myself as well. The copywriting or even script writing, I call
Hmm.
script writing for YouTube, especially on the video, they are all very, very different depending
Hmm.
on you cannot do one size fits all type of publishing anymore. Even you write one blog post, the way that you write copy needs to be very different
Hmm.
for different channels. Talk to us in terms of how do you manage that in terms of like for one blog that you have to write a different copies for different channel. How do you manage that? It's so massive from time to
Yep.
time. Given that
Yeah.
I do it myself and I know how much work that is it any tips and tricks to make that easy?
I will say it's incredibly time consuming. And I can talk about how I've done it in the past that was scalable and then how we
Okay.
do it now as a much larger company. What we've done in the past is, I think, even going into this role many, many years ago, it was well known that you need to play into the hand of each social platform or play into the context of each social platform when
Yeah.
you're creating content. So you don't want to, I mean, you're physically unable to write an essay on Twitter. You can't. There's a character limit on LinkedIn. There are context limitations on Instagram. Instagram is primarily a visual platform. What we're focused on delivering is making sure that, or what I focused on in the past, is taking the, I would say, most valuable components of, let's say, a blog post that we have to offer. So if that's things like compelling statistics, compelling quotes, several bullet points of information in terms of key takeaways.
I
And then
agree.
it's taking those and then kind of fitting them into the character counts or character limits for each platform. If you are a one person show, what I would typically do is I would take like a paragraph of the most valuable information. I'd start with that text paragraph, exactly. And then you start highlighting pieces and parts of it. And then that is a message that ends up across your different platforms. It's not the same exact message,
Yeah.
but it is very similar. Now what we do at LinkedIn, and we're fortunate that we're able to have access to the resources and the size of the team that we do have to be able to go a layer deeper, is that we will actually take those, it's the same concept in theory, where you take those tidbits and pieces of information from the blog that are most valuable. But
Yeah.
what we're doing now is we're actually going and we're working with our design teams, our copywriting teams to create bespoke assets for each channel.
That is wonderful. Is it nice to actually have budget?
Oh, yes. Well, that was going to be my follow up. Is I was like, it's very expensive to do
Yeah.
that. And we have pretty big budgets at LinkedIn. When I see the amount of hours it takes to design something specifically for, if you look at a design statement of work, you'll have
Yeah.
previously it used to just be, okay, your blog assets and your infographic. And then
Yeah.
you would drop the link into social. Now, if you look at one of my campaigns,
You customize everything.
LinkedIn asset 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Same with Twitter asset 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
4, 5, 6.
Instagram
Yeah.
asset, exactly. And then your bill is tens of thousands of dollars.
I agree. You can do it on smaller budget, but still, it's very time consuming. I 100% agree with you.
I'll give you a really quick example. We have a content piece that's live on our blog right now that looks at the engagement trends of Generation Z. So we've
Mm.
recognized that Gen Z is one of the largest buying cohorts, or will be one of the largest buying cohorts
Yeah.
in B2B moving forward because they're entering the workforce.
Yeah, they are entering the workforce. In 10 years, they are going to be a management staff.
Exactly. So the question is, how do you market to them? How do they like to be marketed to in a way that's different than millennials? And the answer is they're very different than millennials in terms of their value set, what they believe in.
Exactly.
So we
Yeah.
have all of that data. That's proprietary data to LinkedIn, their behaviors on the platform, how brands are messaging to them, are they doing it successfully, whatnot. So we've taken all of that data, we've put that across our blog. And then I'll just give you the LinkedIn example. We've then taken that data or snippets of that data and we've launched flip books. So it's literally like PDFs that you can flip through like a book on LinkedIn. They're directly uploaded into the feed. Instead of just saying, hey, go to the blog to read all about this, people are actually getting that experience in the social feed, which, again, if they're only spending 3 seconds looking at it or giving 3 seconds of their attention, which would even be generous in this kind of climate, they're still able to understand what we're talking about. They develop an understanding of what it is we care about or we're trying to say at LinkedIn. And, it deepens the relationship with the brand. It deepens their understanding of our campaign, our message, even if they don't get the chance to go to the blog. So we hope that we're providing like unique kind of content consumption experiences on our blog, on our social media handles, and then within our social media handles on each platform specifically.
Steve is providing so much valuable information. If you really like what he's saying, I would really appreciate that you give a thumbs up and likes, and also comment below. And subscribe to a B2B marketing channel if you can. If you have any specific questions, let me know. Reach out to me anytime. That leads to the next question. How do you measure your team's success?
There's a couple of core KPIs we look at. The first bucket I would categorize these into is around engagement. The second bucket we'd categorize these into is around performance. Let's talk a little bit about the engagement bucket first. We're fortunate that at LinkedIn, even though we are a B2B marketing team, we market on behalf of a very large brand. One of our core KPIs is making sure that we're inspiring the kind of trust, the kind of brand love, the kind of bonds that people need to have with a social media brand the size of LinkedIn. We know that that's good brand marketing 101 is to build those trusted relationships with our audiences. What is the KPI that we track there? We're looking primarily at our engagement data. We like to benchmark against number one, industry standards, so B2B marketing industry standards. Then also looking at like competitive benchmarks. So what is a benchmark if we can source that data from our key competitors like Google and Facebook, Twitter, whatnot. And then it's looking at very granular metrics like for our blog, time on page, page views, sessions, unique page views.
A lot of the data that you are tracking is kind of like a secondary data.
Mm-hmm.
How do you communicate that with management?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's an ongoing conversation that we are having with our leadership. It's really a lot of education because, you have to, and I imagine this is easier at a large brand than it is at a smaller brand.
Very true, by the way.
Just by the nature of the resources we have access to. And I think the long-term thinking that we have to have as a market leader versus being focused on those short-term KPIs, which are like, hey, if I need to make payroll in the next month and I need to meet the demands of my customers.
Yeah, you have to bring the lead.
Exactly. Luckily, we've gotten to a stage where that is equally as important, but we also need to make sure that we're sustaining trust and, bonds with our customers.
I would say your key objective, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, and correct me if I'm totally
Yeah.
off, is really you focus on top of funnel. You try to
Mm-hmm.
build that brand awareness. You try to build that trust
Yes.
that the B2B companies that
Yes.
can associate with
Absolutely.
LinkedIn. To me, it's the brand equity and also the trust and the thought leadership. It's not necessarily focusing on the bottom of the funnel, if you will.
And in terms of the way we communicate that to our leadership, it's again that education journey around what is the importance of brand and what is the importance of building these connective bonds and this connective tissue with our customers. Because at the end of the day, is you should be a good storyteller if you're a content marketer.
Yeah.
Is that you need to go and tell a story to your leadership team to say, hey, look, even though this is not giving you a lead, and there is some content and there are some content marketing efforts, and I'll talk about that second bucket in a second, that are delivering leads and generating demand. But for this engagement bucket, when someone picks up the phone, one of your sales reps calls your customer, are they going to pick up? Are they going to trust what they're hearing from your rep? And if the answer is no, like chances are you don't have a very strong brand and you don't have a very strong reputation with your customers. And a lot of how you establish that trust, that reputation, those connective bonds is through some of this top of funnel marketing. To relate that back to the metrics we're looking at, goes back to that old phrase, and I'll probably butcher it, but it's like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it really make a sound?
Yeah.
We can publish posts all day. We have the resources, we have the people, but if we're not getting the engagement,
then it doesn't matter.
So we're just wasting our time, we're spinning our wheels, and we're adding more noise into an already crowded social media landscape. What we've done in the past couple of years is really look at how do we actually reduce our publishing cadence so that we can put more energy behind 1 or 2 posts a day that are going to really resonate. Because, I don't have to explain the network effect of social media to anybody, I'm sure, who's listening.
Quality over quantity.
Exactly. In the same way that it's really hard to get someone to answer the phone or to book a meeting with someone,
Yeah.
it's also really hard to get someone to engage on social media, especially when your cohort of target audience is marketers. Like, we're curmudgeonly people.
It's very hard to market to us.
Right, exactly. That's our world. And what we try to tell our stakeholders too is like, look, for someone to stop what they're doing and to comment or to add value and kind of create this two-way conversation with the brand, that is just as valuable in some way, shape, or form as them picking up the phone or them answering the phone call and them further engaging or responding to an email from a rep. Because again, it's them taking their time and them electing to say, hey, this struck a chord with me and I am going to engage with the brand. And over time,
Yeah, it's a long play. It's a long play. The brain awareness building
right.
is a long play.
And especially when you look at SaaS marketing, ads marketing is a little bit more cyclical and a little bit more immediate. But in a lot of B2B marketing, the buying cycles are so long that you do need to create that long-term play.
I know that there's LinkedIn sales solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you work closely with them?
Yes, we do. So we actually used to be organized in conjunction with them as well. So my previous role before I stepped into this role was leading blog and social marketing on behalf of our marketing solutions business and our sales solutions business. So I know that side of the business very well as well.
So do you provide content to them, or you are primarily just a marketing solution? Do they actually try to take advantage of some of the content that you created?
So we're primarily focused on creating content for our core audience, which are going to be marketers, and our core revenue stream, which is going to be marketing solutions. And what we've done in the past and what we continue to do is we meet with them pretty regularly to figure out what are those crossover stories that we can tell. So for example, one of the stories that we've found a lot of pickup with is the storytelling around diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have very different worlds or revenue streams at LinkedIn. We have our talent solutions business, which also encompasses our learning solutions business. When we said from a B2B perspective at LinkedIn, let's think about equity and let's think about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a topic, as a business topic, as something that we want to invest in more heavily and invest in content creation on behalf of. The talent story is very different from the sales and marketing story.
100% agree. It's because recruiter is a completely different persona, if you will, than just
Exactly.
sales and marketing. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's where we found a lot of crossover stories is saying, well, the sales and marketing conversation for DE&I is actually very similar because then it focuses on your practices. It goes beyond hiring and it looks at what are inclusive sales practices, inclusive language you can leverage on sales calls. How does that translate to marketing? What does that mean for marketing creative? In the B2B space, how do you work equity into the buying cycle and the buying process to make sure that you are not alienating people because your organization is not kind of up to snuff when it comes to really being progressive, in terms of looking at making equity a priority. So we've partnered with them on a number of different research pieces, core narratives, to make sure that we're saying, hey, we understand that sales and marketing sit in a very similar wheelhouse. They also diverge quite a bit. We want to make sure that if there are stories that do have that crossover, that we tell them in a cohesive way.
So I actually have two personal questions I would like to ask you. Obviously, in terms of a career development, you have a fairly solid career path, right? From Viacom down to Sony to actually LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for young, aspiring marketing professionals in terms of what they need to do to manage their careers?
In terms of advice, and then I'll also pivot to one thing I would have done a little bit differently. Do the things you say you're going to do. It's very simple. This is specifically for folks kind of just getting started or wanting to break into marketing. You'd be surprised how few people do that.
Don't be a talker, be a doer.
Yeah.
And keep your promise.
One of the phrases that we use at LinkedIn is trust is consistency over time. I think that applies to business, that applies to your career. I'll give you the example of the blog migration, which we talked about earlier. That was a project that was passed over probably several times until they gave it to me. And they gave it to me because they knew that even if it was going to be stressful, I had a track record at LinkedIn to do the things that I said I was going to do on the timelines I said I was going to do them.
If you committed to get it done, that people know you will get that done.
Exactly. And that is worth its weight in gold. That is why if people move on in their careers, they're going to call you to hire you. They're going to consider you for projects and promotions. It's really simple advice. Don't overcommit yourself and be sure to follow through on your commitments.
It's for me to be independent consultant. for clients to continuously come to me and for advice. Same thing. I have to deliver what I said I'm going to deliver. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Absolutely.
The other question I would like to ask you is, so what show are you binge watching right now? And do you recommend it?
I am actually on the final episode of Succession.
You know what? Brian Collins, who is a writer I interviewed earlier, and mentioned about the Succession as well. My son got me into it. The writing is fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. And for those of us in business, it's a really fun show to watch because, we're fortunate at LinkedIn that like that's not how we work in any way, shape, or form. But it's like that old boys club corporation of years past that is just, it's really good television.
Not just the writing itself, how they shot the scenes.
Right.
It's incredible. I love it too. I hate every single one of them.
Oh, they're awful.
They are awful.
Awful people.
If I meet them, I will smack them.
Right.
But just the way they interact with each other, the writing, and also how they shot the whole film, that really, really got me into it.
It's interesting, Pam, you mentioned that because I've done a little bit of reading on, and this goes back to kind of storytelling and the importance of storytelling and how many things you have to think about, is that they've actually designed the show through set design, costume design, their scripts, whatnot, to intentionally make those characters unlikable, to make their lives seem awful. Even though they have all this money and access to all this power, their wardrobes aren't very exciting or colorful. The homes they live in aren't super like decorated, or they don't feel homey and familial. And, all of that is supposed to signal to the audience that, hey, it's not actually that great being this wealthy, this powerful. These people are all kind of miserable. So it's just interesting the like levers they've pulled to get that message across.
To kind of get that experience and also the visual across, to actually help us to make that connection in our mind, in addition to listen to what they said.
Absolutely.
Steve, it's wonderful, wonderful talking to you. You have so much to share. I enjoy every single guest, but I enjoyed this episode substantially more because I was a content marketer. I was doing the global role for a long period of time. So everything that you share with me just resonates with me. On top of it, you obviously was a whole lot smarter than me in terms of like managing the content marketing, so much better than me than when I did it 10 years ago. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insight. It's wonderful, wonderful to have you.
Thank you for having me, Pam. It's always great to have these conversations and connect with other really brilliant B2B marketers. So really appreciate your time and for having me on.
So that's a wrap. And thank you so much for watching the show or listening to this episode. I hope to see you. And if you have any questions, let me know. hello@pamdidner.com anytime. Okay? Take care. Bye.
Never miss an episode of B2B Marketing and More by following us here on YouTube and leave a comment while you're at it. You can also find episodes wherever you get your podcasts.